It is indeed a privilege to have Temple Grandin here to speak to us tonight. This is a great way to kick off the academic year, create a wonderful experience for our incoming students. As I say to all my undergrads in the honors program, you are all very special. I know you've heard that from your parents, and you are still very special to us in your own way. And this is one of the messages we want to convey to you by this lecture and having you read Dr. Grandin's book, Thinking in Pictures. I am Dr. Donald Michaels, the director of the honors program. I am your director, and I'm here, and the staff is here to support your journey through these 4 years of college and help you navigate successfully to completion of your degree and success afterwards. That's our number one purpose here. So we are here for you. This coming year, you'll learn what it means to be part of this community. And this will be through your seminars and recitation sections and other activities for part of the honors program. And really, this lecture is intended to be the start of this process. It provides a unique experience for you and lasting memory that you will share with your fellow students. Dr. Grandin is professor of animal sciences and is, without doubt, the most famous person at CSU. Her courses are always in high demand and often fill within minutes after registration opens. You, as honor students, have a better chance of getting into those courses because guess what? You get early priority registration, yes. Now, I hope you didn't come to the honors program because you got priority registration. There were probably, I think, more lofty purposes and goals to join us here. Dr. Grandin has an international reputation for the design of animal handling facilities and for the ethical treatment of animals. I don't want to take the next 10 minutes to list all her awards and accomplishments. We want to get into her talk, but she has received numerous awards and recognition through her career. Most recently, she was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, one of 3 professors here at CSU that is in that very prestigious group of scientists and artists. She's authored over 60 scientific articles and 10 books. We at CSU are justifiably proud of having Dr. Grandin as a distinguished member of our faculty. She represents the best of our university, an outstanding scholar, teacher, mentor, and she also provides valuable service to the livestock industry, but also informing the general public about autism spectrum conditions. Please welcome Dr. Grandin.
It's really great to be here. Lots of things to talk about tonight. When I was an incoming freshman, I thought I was going to be an experimental psychologist. That wasn't where I ended up. And so how do students end up in some of the careers they get into? It's exposure. I got exposed to experimental psychology when I was in high school and in college, but I also got exposed to cattle. And the cattle ended up winning out. I also had a great science teacher. Try taking, some different things. Don't get too specialized. I just read an article in The Economist about an artificial intelligence program that could read x-rays better than the doctors could. I don't think getting hyper-specialized is going to be the best thing to do. You're looking at the future. Okay, when you understand how different kinds of minds think, you can think about how they can work together. The first thing is you have to understand that people do think differently. Steve Jobs talked about thinking differently. Okay, what are some of the conflicts you have in the business world? The techies have always hated the stupid suits. The suits are up there looking at the spreadsheets, and the techies don't, think they're stupid. Some of it has to do with different ways of thinking. You always have the people in the field fighting with the academics. And one thing in both academia and business is people got to get the butt out of the office, the butt out of the lab, and get down and see what's going on out in the actual field. And another big fight in science, is observation true science? In my field, there are some people that will say that if you don't do a controlled experiment, it's not science. So then I'll say, well, what about astronomy then? You know, what about this big Bang Theory wave detector? Just found a gravity wave recently. That's observation. Doesn't have a control. And then the artists, they've always hated the accountants. Is observation part of real science? Yes, it is. Observation is where you get hypotheses for making controlled experiments. Then you have a field in both human medicine and veterinary medicine of epidemiology. You get a case of food poisoning over here, yeah, and then there's another food poisoning over here, another one over here, and you're trying to figure out how to piece them together. What's the common factor for those cases of food poisoning? You know, people that believe in top-down science would say that's anecdotal, but the people working on the food poisoning don't think it's very anecdotal. Now, when I learned that my visual thinking was different than most of the verbal thinking, that gave me a lot of insight. I thought everybody thought in pictures the way I did. And it's been a gradual sort of learning more and more about how different people think differently. So you might wonder about what autism is. A little bit of autism gives you Einstein. It gives you Steve Jobs, probably Thomas Edison. His teacher said he was addled, and he was a hyperactive high school dropout, got educated at home. That was Edison. Jane Goodall did not have a conventional educational route. She had a 2-year associate's degree in secretarial science when she started. You know, she came from England. This is back when women had to be secretaries. This is my slide on the different kinds of thinking. I'm a photorealistic visual thinker. I had trouble with algebra. And I was one of the kids that wasn't allowed to go on and take geometry. So a lot of kids that can't do algebra can do geometry. I'm getting worried about all this testing blocking out a lot of the thinkers that we need. I'm going to be showing you later on why you need visual thinkers like me. Then you have the pattern thinker. A lot of computer science people, the engineers are the pattern thinker. Mathematics, they think in patterns rather than pictures. These kids sometimes have trouble with reading. Then you got the verbal facts person. Then you got the auditory learners. And I have a lot of science-based in my book, another book I have, The Autistic Brain. So you get kids with labels. They're dyslexic. I was listening to the radio coming back from the airport from my trip to Brazil, and there was a show on saying, oh, we're going to have a show about the mayor of Denver who was dyslexic, and that's why he was a good entrepreneur. There's a lot of dyslexic people that are good entrepreneurs. So what are some of the characteristics of visual thinking? It's bottom up, just like epidemiology. You take specific examples, and then you can piece together what common factor caused the case of food poisoning, for example. All concepts consist of specific examples put into categories. That's exactly what you do in epidemiology. Visual thinkers tend to notice details. Now, in my work with animals, I tell people, you got to get away from verbal language. Animals don't think in verbal. It's pictures, it's sounds, it's little smell whiffs of things. So I would get down in the chutes to see what cattle were seeing. Cattle would refuse to go through the chute. People thought I was absolutely, totally crazy doing this. But as a visual thinker, it seemed like an obvious thing to do. And you can see right here, hope this arrow is showing up here. Don't think it is. But you can see a little red car there through the fence. You know, get down there and see what those animals are seeing. A coat on a fence, maybe a hose on the ground, maybe a reflection on water. So there's a little piece of string up there on the post that can be moving. They tend to notice detail we don't notice. I have to give people checklists of all the things to look for. It's also really important to give animals a non-slip flooring. Let's say, with all the engineering majors in here, how good you are at visual thinking. Raise your hand if you saw that that animal was looking at the sunbeam. Locked onto that sunbeam like radar. Okay, now you look at it, it's obvious. You did better here than the scientists at Fermilab. Scientists at Fermilab, they couldn't see it at all. And while I get on the subject of Fermilab, I learned some interesting things about career development. Many of those scientists got interested in physics in college, very early in college, or in high school. Gets back to exposure. Students get interested in careers they get exposed to. Look at how the horse and the zebra have an ear on each other. And then the other ear is on me. Animals will watch with their ears. And then I've done a lot of work with the meatpacking plants. In fact, Greeley plant, Fort Morgan plant, I designed the whole front end of the Fort Morgan plant. You can Google Earth them. You can Google Earth both of them. And I think that's pretty good for somebody they thought was mentally retarded when I was a kid and had no speech until age 4, that I designed the front end of all the Cargill plants in North America. And it was a lot of hard work. And you know what? I worked with a lot of skilled millwright people and welding people. People don't have enough respect for some of the heavy construction that we did. This was really complicated work. We got engineers here. You need to go over there and look at those new buildings they're putting up over there. They're really hard up for electricians right now. It takes smart people to build things. Now, a question I always get asked is, do cattle know they're going to get slaughtered? I had to answer that question early in my career. So I'd go over to the Swift plant in Arizona and then go out to a feed yard, and I found that the cattle behaved the same way in the veterinary chute and at the plant. And if they knew they were going to get slaughtered, they should be a whole lot wilder. Animal is a visual thinker. So if your cattle get nice and tame and used to the person on the horse, the first time they see the man on foot, they're going to run away because that's something scary and new. You see, it's a picture. They've learned the man on the horse is safe and the person on the ground was scary and new. Now, being a visual thinker really helped me in my work designing things because I could see it in my mind. I could draw the drawing and see the whole thing. See, there's two parts of designing things. There's the industrial design side, that's me. Then there's the more engineering side. Like Steve Jobs, for example, was an artist. He wasn't an engineer, he was an artist. And he designed the interface on the iPhone. You know, you don't have to have a PhD in engineering to operate the iPhone. Because an artist designed the interface. The engineer had to make it work. Steve Jobs had no idea how to make the thing actually work. You know, that's where you need to have the different kinds of thinking. And what I found in the meatpacking plants, you know who designs the whole layout for the whole entire plant? It was the draftsman. And then the guys working in the shop. Innovative mechanical equipment, it was made by guys in the shop. Degreed engineers, they would do boilers, refrigeration, roof trusses, concrete stress testing, stuff like that. And the young ones would get ripped off by contractors. That was really kind of pathetic. I think they better stick to refrigeration and boilers because knowing how to work with contractors, that's an old fogey's job. I've learned everywhere there is to rip off steel and concrete work. And you have to make sure that they don't do it. This just shows a real simple little handling facility where you stand at the gate pivot and the cattle will just circle right on around you. You see, you want to use that animal behavior to help you. You want to work with the animal behavior, not fight against it. So how does the visual thinking work? It's associative. My mind works like Google for pictures. You give me a keyword like shoes, well, I see these little party shoes I had when I was a kid. I had to wear those to church and wear the stupid little frilly dress. I hated it. And here are some better childhood shoes. It's great that the shoes of the 50s are back in styles now. You're wearing our stuff. That makes us happy. There's some more 50s stuff that everybody's wearing now. And then this is shoes I wear today. And then I start thinking about some of the things they have stepped in. I will not show a picture of that. There's a picture of something nicer that a boot might step in. You can see how I get from a picture of a boot to something that a boot maybe stepped in. Now, there's actual evidence, scientific evidence. There's two types of visualizers. There's the artist kind, who thinks in pictures, and then there's the pattern thinker, or the engineering, computer science mind. And different parts of the brain are used. And this is one of my drawings. And when you are a weird geek, and I was a weird geek, I still got bullied in college. And the only places I didn't get bullied in college was shared interest groups. I had this other friend, Kenny. We was CB radio nuts. And I think he was probably on the spectrum, too. When I was in high school, what saved me was horses, model rocket club, and working on roofing. Again, shared interests. Get involved with shared interests. So how did I start my business when I was such a weird geek? I would show people my drawings. And they'd go, oh, you might be weird, but you drew that? And I've noticed an interesting thing about drawings. as our industry went from hand drafting, that was my generation, the old folks like us did pretty well with the computers. But where I saw a problem is you get a young 22-year-old that just graduated with an associate's degree in drafting, and we started getting weird, strange mistakes on drawings, like they didn't know where the center of the circle was. The drawing is step dimensions wrong and things like that. Then, just in the last year, I got some of the worst drawings I ever got. In something like a big meat plant, you got to do what's called an as-built drawings, where maybe you changed a bunch of stuff and then you go back and draw a drawing of what actually is built there. I just got an as-built drawing from a major company, and they had the cattle marked in with pen on this computer-aided drawing walking through concrete walls. It sort of doesn't work. And then from another major company, I got a big elaborate pig handling system drawing with no gates in it. They're getting worse. And I think it's happening because the people that are drawing this stuff have never built anything, and they've never drawn by hand. One of the things I had to do when I learned drafting and design is I took a drawing of this great big Swift plant, and I spent 2 days walking around in that Swift plant until every single line would match something in the plant. Okay, the easy thing, the circle is the water tower, that's easy. The little square is a concrete column that holds up the roof. Then after you teach yourself how to do that, you can look at the drawings and see it. But this is something I'm concerned about. In the last year, I got really awful drawings from 2 major companies who shall remain nameless. Now, this is brain scan that shows I have a big visual thinking circuit. Really big visual thinking circuit. And this is a circuit in the brain for speak what you see. That's the normal one. That's mine. And I got a lot of extra bushes on it. Maybe that's why I get pictures when you give me keywords, like Google for Images. And when search engines were first invented, I just loved them. I go, wait a minute, this is how my mind works. But who do you think's inventing the search engine? I've been out to Silicon Valley. I've been to the Googleplex. Oh, half of them, they're on the autism spectrum, undiagnosed. But they're on the autism spectrum. See, the thing is, a little bit of autism gives you intelligence. Too much autism, and you get a kid that's nonverbal, maybe can't address themselves. See, a little bit of the trait makes the brain more cognitive. It's sort of like the differences between dogs and wolves. There's been some very interesting research on that. A wolf is more cognitive. He's better at problem solving. We've bred dogs to be super social. And when there's a problem to solve, like opening up a box to get some food, domestic dog's so busy asking us to help it that it doesn't pay attention and watch the other dog open it. It's more social, where the wolf is more cognitive. There's a point where being kind of geeky is just part of normal variation. When does it become a disorder? Also, a lot of these labels are half based in science, and the other half is based on doctors squabbling in conference rooms at the Hyatt and the Marriott. Serious. And now when you count how many fibers I have to speak what you see, I'm kind of short on fibers. So you get too much of it, then you do get an abnormality. Now you can see the wrecked math department, and I've got working memory problems. But on the plus side, I've got abilities in visual thinking. And I'm going to show you later on why the engineering department needs to have visual thinkers like me, prevent some really serious accidents. One of the things I'm concerned about is a self-driving car. I was driving today and was listening on the radio that one of the car companies is going to make a self-driving car with no brakes, no steering wheel, no controls. I go, wait a minute. You know what my big concern is? Hacking. It's not a matter of will it get hacked, it's a matter of when it's going to get hacked. So I'm driving this car down to the Denver airport, or rather, it's taking me to the Denver airport, and it gets hacked. Some hacker wants to drive it into a bridge abutment and make splat out of me. I'd like to have a mechanical switch where I can turn off the computer, kill it. Mechanical kill switch. A brake, it can be an old-fashioned one on the console, pull it up, and some kind of steering to get it off the road. It needs to have a mechanical way to kill it, because it will get hacked. And I'm going to later on, show you a really bad accident that happened. That was a visual thinking mistake so elementary, I couldn't believe it. But I had to read a lot of stuff on a lot of flights to figure out what caused it. Well, I tried to do computer programming back in 1968, back on the state-of-the-art IBM Telekite type machine. I'm the generation where I like to freak out students. I should have brought airline boarding passes. I had a whole bunch of them. I threw them out. You know, you get those cardboard boarding passes, and they're about this big. Well, they're that big for a reason. That's the evolutionary remnant of the IBM punch card. And when you use the IBM punch card, it's a mechanical spreadsheet. So it would sort your data into little chutes. So imagine having a box with 3,000 boarding passes in it. And each boarding pass has got your data in it, and you sort them in this machine. That was 1975. Okay, let's look at the mind of the pattern thinker. This praying mantis is made out of a single sheet of folding paper. And the background there is the folding pattern. Boy, that's not my mind. Now, I know there's some people in here going in computer science, electrical engineering. That's your mind. Well, make you really hot, you need to get across disciplines. Let's mix up some mechanical, some electrical, and some computer science all together with a dash of physics. You'll be hot. The spy satellite company will hire you. I'm not supposed to know this place makes spy satellites, but I have a way of finding out. But go across disciplines. But there's a tendency to just stay in silos. And that, you know, that's not a good thing. Get outside your discipline. There are some origamis, some more really neat origami stuff. Now, when I asked a physicist to think about a church steeple, instead of getting pictures in his mind the way I do, he got patterns of people swaying and singing and praying. I go, wow, trippy. I see specific ones. There's different ways you can do the math, verbally or more visual spatially. Schools get too hung up on just doing it a certain way. I'm getting very concerned. Our high schools have taken out too many things that can be career options. We got a gigantic shortage right now of diesel mechanics. You know, you like all these electronic things and everything you get? Well, they come in on trucks, these things called trucks. They back up the loading docks, kind of stuff I understand. That's where you get the stuff from. Container ship coming over here from China. You know, but students aren't getting introduced to enough different things. Theater's a great career for some people. There's somebody else that might be, you know, building things. Now, there really is evidence for the different kinds of minds. Let's look at some different ways to look at thinking. Associational, that's associated with creativity, versus more linear. I was just at a big plant science convention. What was I doing at a plant science convention when I'm in animal science? Well, I was giving them this talk. And a top plant scientist said to me, I get these graduate students in, and I get these postdocs in, and they're so super specialized, they got no creativity. You see, associational thinking gives you creativity on thinking up ideas for experiments. Pictures and patterns versus words. But the big thing is bottom up. I'm a bottom-up thinker. I take the pieces and I put them together, like epidemiology. Start off with observation. Top down, you got to make the hypothesis first, but somewhere you got to get the hypothesis. Our brain can be more social or less social. And I make concepts out of specific examples. A lot of personality traits is like a music mixing board. Genetics is not simple. It's not just simple Mendelian genetics. It's lots of little tiny snips. Music mixing board is probably a really good metaphor. Well, here are two famous people, probably a little bit of autism. Stevie Jobs, weird loner, he brought snakes to school and turned them loose. Bullied and teased in high school, had to be taken out of one school, put in another school. Einstein had no speech until age 3. What would happen to him today in today's educational system? I'm getting worried that too many smart kids are getting, their various labels, and they're getting screened out by our educational system. A lot of them are getting addicted to video games. And don't call me an old fogey, and I know there's some engineering majors can get addicted to video games. Don't let it happen, because it's like doing real crap for your career, I'll tell you right now. If these students were going into great careers in the gaming industry, I'd feel differently about it, but that's not what's happening. No, it's a drug. And I have another book for the autism community called The Loving Push, and my co-writer, Deborah Moore, found a hideous PowerPoint presentation online about how they were specifically designing the games to make them more addictive. Just don't go there if you want to become a great engineer. Okay, dyslexia. Here are some famous CEOs that probably were dyslexic. How about the head of JetBlue? He probably had ADHD. Steven Spielberg was dyslexic. He got rejected from the top film school for crappy grades. But the thing that helped him was mentors and internships. Get into good internships where you can try on careers. Too many parents have forced their student to become a doctor, and then it was hated. And I wouldn't go into hyper-specialized medicine, because artificial intelligence is going to get you there, but it won't replace the doctor's secretary. And it's not going to replace the general practice person. Won't replace that. The head of IKEA had both ADHD and dyslexia. Maybe that's why you love IKEA so much. Okay, again, the different kinds of minds working together. Steve Jobs was an artist. The engineers had to make it work. All right, this is the reason why you need my kind of mind. You are looking at a mess you don't want to get very near, a gigantic mess. It's still leaking radioactive water into the ocean. They don't know what to do about it. They're still pouring salt water on it. It's all dripping down through the burned up slab in the bottom. They don't even know how badly burned up it is. Now, all I need to know about a nuclear power plant is when I need the emergency cooling pump and it doesn't work, I'm in a lot of trouble. And this is an old 60s reactor. I know the new designs now have a gravity safety thing. I've found out about that. But this was an old piece of junk, not very forgiving. And if that cooling pump doesn't work, you're going to get meltdown. And it's not a real smart idea to take this cooling pump that you need really badly with this electric motor and big electric generators and put it in a non-waterproof basement. I'm not kidding. Simple, watertight doors. It would not have happened. I'm going, how could they make that mistake? You know why they made the mistake? The mathematician doesn't see the water going in there. When I was young, I used to say it was stupidity. It's not stupidity. It's not seeing it. Maybe I better be designing the safety systems because I can see the water going in there. Then the second mistake that was made was social. They had about a week before they were really in trouble. They never called for help. Didn't want to lose face. How could you let a reactor go in breach of containment when all you had to do was pick the phone up? And I got the card right there for Schmeckley Construction. They built the Cargill plant over here. It would have even been hard to flood the cores. You know, just get the gray hairs out of retirement from GE, fly them over there, and wouldn't have even been difficult. I can visualize how to do it. Just show me where to cut into the pipes so we don't glow in the dark. But they just sat there in the control room and watched it burn up, and they never called for help. So that was a social mistake. But the first mistake was a visual thinking mistake. So I want you to really think about the hackers on the self-driving car. I'm concerned today that too many policymakers are too far removed from the world of practical things. Can you imagine getting a degree in being a public administrator? I'm going, really? You can get a degree in bureaucracy? About 20 years ago, somebody put this sign in my office on administratium, the heaviest element known to science. And the administratium's got this atomic weight that's like super, super high, and it's totally, it has no ability to react with anything because it's completely inert. Administratium. I don't know where that came from. This is in the time of the fax machine. I need to look it up online. I haven't done that yet. But right now, we got a big shortage of people that can do practical stuff. The things that saved me in high school was hands-on stuff. I was learning carpentry work. When I was getting my master's degree, I was painting a stupid sign for the Arizona State Fair for the Himalayan monster. That's me up on top of that thing. But you know what I was learning there? Entrepreneur skills, business skills. You know, if you want to like throw in another little course, why don't you take a business class? You know, throw that in along with the computer science and the engineering and stuff like that. Or maybe you ought to take a construction management class so if you're in charge of a construction project right out of school, you don't get ripped off. I watched that happen, like 4 or 5 different jobs. They were taking young engineers right out of college, the contractors, so you might as well throw them to the wolves. They may know how to do the math, they know how to deal with contractors. I saw that happen. Hands-on classes, get out there and do that. You know, this is, I do a lot of talks, high schools. Get kids interested in things like engines. We got to get kids learning how to work, too, young. And I got interested in cattle because I was exposed to them as a teenager. And there's so many things now that you can do to get businesses started today that are free. This Martian book started out as a blog, a free blog. Then it was a 99-cent Kindle. It cost nothing. There are my jobs, the beginnings of my 2 jobs. One at the Swift plant in Arizona, and that's the beginnings of the dip vat project. And I realized how much working with construction, designing things, because I'd have to sell a job, then I would design a job, then I supervised its construction, and then we had to start it up and make it work. Construction's all about finishing jobs. And I realized that really affects how I think. So when you get, through all your education, you want to see out in a really great career. A career you're going to like, a career that's going to make a difference. So how did I sell my skills to clients when I was really a weird geek? Well, my writing wasn't weird. So I'd write in livestock publications. I'd demonstrated cattle handling. I'd show drawings. Also, there'll often be doors to opportunity, and they open up for just a second. And if you watch the HBO movie where I got to design that dip vat, and they did get the metal plate out of there and get it working right, the manager of the feed yard walked up to me and asked me to design it. I did it. I went through the door. I said, give me 3 weeks. This was pre-internet. I figured it would take me 2 weeks just to get some of the drawings I needed for the concrete work. And I was at the 60% level of knowledge. Now, I had to study really hard to get to the 90% level. Now, lots of times a woman won't even take the job unless she's at 90%. The guys will take it at 60%. But then I've seen stupid guys, and they're plant wreckers. They'll go in and take a job at the 30 or 40% level and then try to wing it. It's a disaster. How about you just remodel and rebuild a plant, $20 million project? Whoops, not enough wastewater treatment. It closed. Yes, that really happened. Happened about 20 years ago. Not too smart. How about I completely ruined the refrigeration system? Because I wouldn't touch refrigeration. Okay, mathematicians, you can do the refrigeration. I'll do the cattle handling and some of the mechanical stuff. And then there were some good mentors out in the industry. There was a great contractor named Jim Ohl. There were some good feed yard managers. The people that were nasty to me, they were the cowboy foremans. It was not the managers. And there's some more of my drawings. And there's the project that they recreated for the movie. I love just seeing my projects recreated because I want to see students getting turned on to cool stuff they can do. Get your portfolio out there. You've all got LinkedIn. There's all kinds of things. I just had to do things like my little brochure. Color printing was really expensive back in those days, so I wanted to make a classy brochure that wasn't color printing. And I like to show this to the educators. I'll say to them, yes, I'm getting on a jet plane tomorrow. And it's pretty complicated when they take the covers off. Have a little respect for the people that build it, people who designed it, and the people that keep it running. Because I'm going on an airplane tomorrow, I would like to make sure that the jet engine works. You know, a lot of young people today, they don't have any idea where their food comes from. They don't have any idea where anything comes from. But a lot of young people want to make things better. What I recommend on something that you want to improve or activate about, get out in the field and find out what it is that interests you. I gave a talk last year at the University of California in an English class. I've done a lot of different kinds of classes. And this student says to me, I want to do social justice. I go, wait a minute, that's so vague and broad. I don't know what you mean by social justice. You got to pick out something more specific to work on. You're going to help the homeless. You're going to help free prisoners that are wrongfully convicted. I mean, find something, this actual thing you can work on. I worked on improving slaughter plants. And when I first started out, I thought I could do it all with equipment. First 10 years of my career, I was going to fix the whole world with equipment. I found I could only fix half the problems with equipment. Then it's management. And what really fixed it was on a big customer like McDonald's, get the power of the purse behind me. Then we really cleaned up some stuff. But you've got to pick out something you can actually put your head around, something that's not abstract. You've got students today that are totally removed from agriculture, but also you've got people out in the heartland that are totally removed from people in the cities. Because I did a little survey, get out in the heartland of the U.S., and I'd ask, well, how many people have a Facebook friend in Chicago? And I get maybe one hand going up. So it goes both ways. 50% of young adults in the UK cannot connect pigs with bacon. I'm going, really? You got to be kidding here? Here's a great a great program where they educate consumers about farming, Pig Adventure, Fair Oaks Farm out of Chicago. You can go visit a farm. You know, you hear about factory farms, you hear about all this bad stuff. Well, it is a factory farm, but it's a very, very well-run one. Let's just call it large-scale commercial. I'd like to be, you know, a little more neutral language. And what I'm worried about with all the social media is it's making people being in their silos worse. There's about 25% of young people that are getting all their news off of Facebook. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm concerned now when I go on planes that people are not reading news in depth. Since the phones came out, Facebook and games and movies on planes. I see a lot of Kindle books and I see a lot of paper books, but I don't see news, in-depth news things being read, and I'm not seeing it read online either. Well, I usually get in the front of the plane, but I still have to use the restroom in the back. So when I come back, I'm going to go look at what everybody's reading. Laptops now are for work. That usually has heavy-duty work on it. But I'm concerned on a lot of issues, people not reading deeply enough. I like my news balance, so I buy a Wall Street Journal, I buy a New York Times, and then I like to get a Business Week and maybe a Fortune. That's just right for a flight from Denver to New York. That's my reading. Or I work on some other work I got to do. We got to work on chopping the silos down. It's going to really help you with your career. Don't get too narrow. There are some majors that just get so narrow, I don't think it's smart. You see, I took the old-fashioned liberal arts where you took English literature, but it was broad English literature. It turned out to be my favorite class. I thought I was going to hate it. I go, why did I have to take this stupid class in English literature? I found out I liked it. But it was a broad survey class, and the professor explained what the emotions of what the authors were trying to convey for different books. I took history. It was broad-based, really good. You got to get people interested in things. When I was in high school, I was fascinated with this optical illusion room. And there's one of my designs in a 3D drawing program. I show this, tell parents, well, get kids, working with things. And I always like to show off the 3D printer because this is where computer meets gooey plastic stuff. Computer world meets the real world. And of course, I'm going to show books off, and I'll sign books afterwards. But before we do that, I got to do some questions, because that's the part I really like. Okay, how about some questions right there? And I'll repeat it so everybody can hear it.
At the end of your book, you mentioned that your religious views have changed, but you didn't really go in depth about it, and I was really curious how they changed, if you don't mind my asking.
Religious views, I'd recommend you read the end of the book. I think one of the most important things is to do the golden rule, and let's use regular plain language. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That's the golden rule, instead of using old-fashioned language. There's certain themes that all religions have. I think one of the most important things is things that you do that make the world a better place. And that's sometimes a lot of hard work. When I was young, I used to look for the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? It's doing something that improves things. That's what it is. For me, that's very, very simple now. It's that simple. I'm getting old now. Sciatic nerve's hurting me. It's like I'm an old car now falling apart. But I had to get to my late 40s before I kind of realized that. When I was young, I was looking for the whole secret, super secret meaning of life. One thing I learned early in my career when I was doing design projects on ranches that had been bought by super rich people, and I learned that 2 Learjets in your garage does not buy happiness. Now they have to be Citations. But in the 70s, it was Learjets. I learned that all that kind of stuff doesn't buy happiness. You got to have enough money for your basics. And when I was next door to my aunt's ranch, there's this wonderful family, Bird Lindsay. Super nice guy, works at the military base, help everybody fix their broken stuff. Nicest guy. He had a really junky prosthetic leg. He had real difficulty walking, but he did everything. But he always had his truck or his horse right there, so he didn't have to walk very far. This guy was one of the nicest guys, and everybody he interacted with made the world a better place. I think that's sort of the things that's the meaning of life. It's not complicated. And if I help you to go out and get careers you really like, get out and have a good life, then I've done something of value. But you have to work hard at it. I had a hard times when I was your age. And I remember over at the Swift plant when I was really down in all kinds of trouble, the really nice superintendent, Norb Goskowitz, said, you've always got to keep persevering. And the cattle buyer told me, trouble is opportunity in work clothes. And then I found another saying on the wall of the art building at Arizona State University, and it said, obstacles are those terrible things you see when you take your eyes off the goal. Now, I've since learned by Googling it that it came from Henry Ford. But back in the 70s, I didn't know where it came from. Okay, right there.
You talked about how when you were younger, you felt like an outsider.
Oh, I was totally an outsider when I was younger.
But you knew you were different, and then as you grew older, you sought to communicate and conform.
Well, you see, you got to remember when I was young, none of the books existed. And where a diagnosis is helpful, I think on the employment stuff, it's holding some kids back. They get babied and they're not learning basic things because they're getting babied. But where a diagnosis can help is on dating and relationships. Understanding that you think differently, and then you can start as an engineering, say, do a workaround to start figuring out how to deal with that. You know, the thing that kind of been hard for me looking at is just how irrational people sometimes can get. You know, that kind of just blows my mind. But the other thing I'm also finding out is that if you got rid of all the geeks and nerds, mild autism and Asperger's and geeks and nerds, the same thing, we wouldn't have any electric lights. Tesla, who invented the power plant, was probably on the spectrum. Mozart was probably on the spectrum. You take out some social circuits, then you get circuits to do cool stuff like music and making electricity, stuff like that. Okay, right there.
What things would you change in our current education system to help foster that growth of both autism?
Well, we need to be putting all the hands-on things back in schools. Art, cooking, music, woodworking, welding. I think one of the problems is that students aren't getting exposed to enough career options. In some states, you can learn math, English, and sports. And there's way too much emphasis on sports. I mean, you're going in. I went over and visited a high school about 2 years ago, and they'd spent $400,000 on a new tract, but they'd cut band. And I think a student's much more likely to get a career in music than to get a career in track. It's not going to last very long because their knee joints are going to fall off. You know, I think it's some of the things the priorities are getting wrong. And you look at economies that are really good. Germany's got the best economy in Europe because they've kept their skilled trades. We have a huge shortage right now of skilled tradespeople. Also, some of the engineering schools now are realizing that they need to, some of these engineers need to get out and actually know how to build stuff. Because the thing about the contractors ripping them off, that's real, that happened. I was on those projects. Well, you're talking about some bad stuff. Concrete that wore out in 6 months because it had dirt in it. Okay, right over there. Well, in design, you see that if you're interested in design, there's a field called industrial design. But some of the classes that you need, in some cases, you won't find them here. They'd be over at the community college. But I think somebody that's working on some engineering stuff, it wouldn't hurt them one bit to take some trade stuff over at the community college and getting the hands-on thing. Because you're talking, like these contractors ripped off these young engineers. This was expensive messes at these plants. And there was some of the stuff I had designed. I couldn't, you see, you need to have, it's sort of like you talk about the fights between the people in the field and the people in academia. You see, you need to have both. And so you get involved in your career really good at both field stuff and academic stuff and kind of go cross-discipline. You're going to be hot, and artificial intelligence will not replace you. It's going to replace the expert radiologist. He's going to get replaced by AI. But the person that can go across the disciplines won't. Okay, right here.
You mentioned that you found that students often choose studies that are either too broad or very, very specific. So how would you suggest you find a
Okay, this is a really good question. How do you find a place in the middle? All right, if we look at engineering, I've already talked about, the people that are really hot. Okay, you want the real high-end jobs, they go across disciplines, like computer science, electrical, mechanical, things like that. Okay, if you're going into medicine, some of that's getting way too hyper-specialized and narrow. They got no problem-solving ability. I talked to a lady last year that broke out in a rash. She was down in Mexico, and the Mexican doctor says, yeah, I think I just give you some Benadryl. She ended up at a big, fancy medical center. I won't say where it was, but it was in the U.S. last year. They diagnosed her with lupus, and they were taking biopsies. It turned out they were biopsying hives. And the reason why she had hives was because there was an ingredient in a new medication she took that she was allergic to. They got her off that medication. A week of Benadryl, cured. She did not have lupus. Really? Hive biopsies? That's a real case. That happened last year. I talked to that lady for about an hour. She went through the whole case with me. But that's an example of being way too narrow. Another person I talked to, person my age, starting to ache all over, really feeling really crappy, about $20,000 worth of bone scans and everything. She had untreated Lyme disease. It might have been a good idea to run some blood tests on infectious stuff first. Let's rule it out. So you're getting so hyper-specialized, they're not thinking of those things. And this is simple stuff. It's very, very simple stuff. It's not complicated stuff. So I think the thing to do is think about, you sometimes don't know where your career is going to go. Internships every summer. Do career-relevant internships. Try things on. Let's just take it in our department. We have like 50 different internships. Well, one student did an internship over at the JBS Greeley plant for meat quality control. She loved it. She did another internship with Farm Credit Union and hated it. And then you have another student that loved the credit union and couldn't stand the plant. This is why you need to try stuff on, because you don't want to end up in jobs you hate. And that's something you want to learn really early on. I think every summer ought to be in a career-relevant internships where you're actually, finding out what possible careers really are going to be all about. Because in construction, it's all about outcomes. And I want you to go out and get good jobs that you're going to like, and jobs that aren't going to be instantly replaced. Okay, let's just take about 3 more questions right over there. Okay. Well, when I first started out, I wasn't famous. When I worked in construction for 20 years. I was living in strip motels with construction crews. I had a job in Cincinnati, and in 1980, we lived in a slum apartment with broken mailboxes. I was in there with a disgusting old pig plant in Cincinnati. I was invisible. They would sometimes do really bad things to animals in front of me that I couldn't do anything about. You got to work hard. You work hard. Now, getting on the famous thing, you know where people really get in trouble with that? Young movie stars, they get too famous, they get real famous real young, and they all crash and burn. Now, older one, later in life, you realize how hard you had to work to get there. But you go looking, and I've looked at the histories of a lot of, look at Michael Jackson, for example. Start out really young, and I went to the Emmys, and I realized, it's the movie industry award show. We have an award show at our American Meat Institute. But people aren't that interested in our awards show at the McCormick Place Convention Center in Chicago. Well, they are interested in the movie award show, but it's basically the same thing. And when we went to the parties afterwards, let me tell you, they were not drunken batches. Everybody was out busy there looking for the next job is what they were doing. And then when I went to the Golden Globes, they took this plain old Hilton hotel, they made it really cool with all this scaffolding and stuff put inside. They're not allowed to make any holes in the floor. I was like checking that out. And they're giving away all this free stuff. And the thing is, you got to realize that's not the real world. Because the next day I had a 6 o'clock flight. I got a middle seat by the bathroom, last row, for a flight from LA to Philly. I go, welcome to the real world. I was going to go back and talk to cattle organization. It's not, that kind of stuff's not the real world. So people ask me, well, how do you feel about all those people at the airport walking up to me all the time? I figure it's a responsibility. I've always got to be on my best behavior. I better not pick my nose at the airport, because somebody's going to take a picture of it and put it up online. And that would be horrible. But I've worked, I'll be 70 next year. I've worked long and hard in my career. And I've had, setbacks. You got to work really hard. When you look at someone like, I've looked up biographies like the Wright brothers and Thomas Edison, they worked hard. They learned how to work at an early age. I've read the biography of in engineering. I'd recommend you read the biography of Elon Musk. He's the SpaceX guy. This guy, when he was in college, he took dirty jobs like cleaning rust out of the inside of tanks in a hazmat suit. Like really nasty jobs. I mean, this guy learned how to work. He also had vision. His favorite book was Hitchhiker's Ride to the Galaxy. But you work hard. Sometimes you just don't know where you're going to go. The other thing is, if a door to opportunity opens up, go through it. It's only going to be open for a second. I went through it at the 60% level, but I quickly made sure I got up to the 90% level real fast. How do you know when you find your passion? Sometimes you don't. I had one of my early jobs, I wrote for the Arizona Farmer Ranchman magazine. And there were parts of that job that were fun, like writing a feature article, and writing up show and sale results is not fun. Giant lists. I leave out one champion bull of one breed, and I'm getting phone calls that, they would get real mad about that. Sometimes you just got to go out there, and the first thing I think is don't go into a career that you actually hate. That is not the thing to do. Too many parents have forced their kid to become a lawyer or a doctor, and they've hated it. That's not the thing to do. Go into a career you think you're going to like. And then the other thing is you can get in situations where you have a really bad boss. And that's a situation where you're going to have to change horses. That does not work. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are if you have a really horrible boss. Okay, right there. Well, a lot of hours. I had to just work hard to figure out how. We'd have things like an equipment startup, and something wouldn't work, and you had to just figure out how to do it. But also just the time it took to do the drawings. I spent when I was doing hand drafting, I spent hours and hours and hours hand drafting. That was just tons of work. I did a job for the U.S. government. I drew 26 sheets of hand-drawn drawings for it. That was just a ton of work. And working on a PhD was a ton of work. There's a lot of stuff that's just, doing research can be a ton of work. Okay? Well, I had quite a few mean bosses along the way. That was really hard to deal with. One of the things that helped me deal with that was I always had more than one project going. So if something failed, I had something else to go and do. I basically have no personal life. I get back from a trip and I'm answering the correspondence and I spend a lot of time. I don't really have a personal life. Maybe that's something I've sacrificed. It kind of gets down to what you want out of life. You see, I really liked figuring out how to solve a problem. I really like designing stuff and figuring out how to solve a problem. But I also like it when somebody comes up to me and says, well, because of your book, my kid went to college. Or I got my Asperger kid off of video games. He's studying engineering now and doing really well. That kind of stuff turns me on. Or I pushed my kid and he's got a great job and he likes it. Where something, you have a good outcome. You're not going to like every minute of your job. There's a lot of stuff that You got to do work that's boring. It's not all going to be a bliss. Okay, right there.
So how do you feel about the removal of Asperger's from DSM-5?
What do I think about the changes in the DSM? Well, I don't really like the fact they merged Asperger's and autism all together. I'm looking at it from, I can understand when my scientist, when I put the scientist hat on, I can understand why they did it. But the service provider hat, it's really bad. Because I am seeing too many smart kids, like just a geeky Asperger's, what we call geeks and nerds. I went to school with a ton of kids that would be labeled Asperger's today. And they're putting them in with super low functioning kids. That, I absolutely don't want to see that. That's not good. Also, you now have a label where you got such a range. You're going from Steve Jobs and Einstein and Mozart to somebody who can't dress themselves, and you're calling it the same thing? So I often am seeing too many smart kids getting babied, and they aren't learning basic skills like shopping, handling money. Basic things I learned when I was like 10 and 12 years old. And so I get concerned about this, and people get too locked into the label. I see one kid goes into a gifted program, he's the same geek, and then I see another kid just addicted to video games, and he's 12 years old and he's never gone shopping by himself. That's just ridiculous. I go to these meetings and I find I have to talk about shopping. The other thing I talk about is starting to learn work skills early. Okay, middle school, if you belong to a church, you need a church volunteer job. Work in the farmer's market. At 14, you can go into safe retail here, like bagging groceries, ticket taker at the movie theater, work in a shoe store. Kids have got to learn how to work. I'm seeing smart kids on the spectrum graduate from college with a degree in philosophy and crash and burn in the workplace. Never learn how to work. I think it's good to take some philosophy classes, but maybe I'll take some business along with it. I don't want to get to where we're going to get where you turn college into trade school. I'm glad that I had old-fashioned liberal arts education where I took this English survey course. I took a philosophy class. I took a logic class. I had enough credits for a minor in biology. I took a history class that was a broad survey course. I think those things were good. Okay. Next project I'm working on. Well, I'm working on a book right now. When I was a little kid, I used to play. I worked on inventing little bird kites. You know how jet airplanes have those little wingtips on them? I had a bird kite that had those wingtips that I made when I was 7. And I went to duplicate it. It wasn't all that easy. I finally got it to work with Office Max file folders. I also looked up all these wingtips and turbulence reducing things on planes. It was really fun looking at Google patents on scalloped cowling on the back of the engine. And they tried all these different shapes. They tried a ton of different shapes, just experimenting with it. But that bird kite wasn't all that easy to recreate. And part of it has to do with I used rough art paper. I got the bird kite to work with the Office Max file folder, but I couldn't get my disk kite to work because I couldn't get the exact same kind of art paper that has a rough surface. And then I looked up things online like why a golf ball has dimples in it. Well, it reduces air turbulence around it. And Office Max file folder didn't work for my disk kite. And then I started sticking little pieces of crepe paper on it to give it a rough surface, and that helped some. But the thing I realized when I read the Wright brothers book is how much tinkering they had to do to figure out how to get the plane to steer. I tinkered and tinkered and tinkered with it. It was a ton of work, trying lots of different things until I found something that worked. So that's something I'm working on right now. And I'm doing a lot of talks. I figure one of the things I need to do at this point in my career is if I can get students turned on, and then if this talk helps you guys to go out and be successful, and do interesting things and constructive, good things, then I've done my job. And we'll take one more question, and then I think we'll go, there's good cake out there, and I got to get a piece of the chocolate, okay? All right. Well, I don't have a photographic memory for everything. Now, I do have a photographic memory for things, if they say it's secret. I got to see the secret Disney ride designs. I signed my life away, but let me tell you, they are memorized. But I don't memorize every hotel room I go into because I could care less. Unless they're really weird or really awful, they usually don't get memorized. It does. You don't just memorize everything that you just don't care about. Okay, I think maybe one more. Okay, right there. So it helped you to understand your sister? Okay. Well, I had terrible panic attacks, and I wrote about it in the book about taking medication. And you see, on the medication thing, a little bit of just the right thing can sometimes really work, but sometimes no thought goes into it. There's another crisis, and I'll just throw like 5 more drugs at it. But a little bit of just the right thing, that really helped me, because I found out that my fear center was 3 times larger than normal. Well, it's been great having you here, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Temple. Would you accept this gift and our gratitude for...
Thank you very, very much.
Has lots of goodies in there. We have lots of honors kitsch. Great stuff. So I do have some business to cover for you. So we're going to have a slide up here about the activity for tomorrow. So there is a reception with cake and punch in the foyer of the theater. As I said before, Dr. Grandin has agreed to sign your copy of Thinking in Pictures, and she'll be out toward the Starbucks in the hallway there. So take your book and get that signed if you want to. The Honors Student Association has a table set up in the foyer with information about their activities and how to join that organization, so please stop by and learn about the HSA. And tomorrow is the community service activity. You are to meet in the southeast corner of the Moby Gym parking lot. There'll be 9 big school buses there. I don't think you can miss it. So just walk across the green area from AV, and you must be there by 8:45 tomorrow. And you'll leave promptly at 9 o'clock for your service activities. We'll return around 1 o'clock, so you will have time to have lunch. The dining facilities close at 2. Bring a water bottle and wear work weather-related appropriate clothing, sturdy shoes, a hat, sunglasses. We'll provide water, sunscreen, bug spray, and snacks. Again, let's recognize Dr. Temple Grandin.